Welcome to Attribute Shift here on the Dota Download, the channel that almost never puts up content unless there's something to clearly rant about in Dota. So I'm here with Jack, or KBBQ. Jack, welcome. Do you feel like you have things to rant about today?
Thank you. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Yeah, sort of. I mean, I think, it's been a rough year, but everybody has a lot to rant about. And I'm gonna try to make it less rant and just more, more just the situation that we're in, and that we specifically, here in North America, and having a team that still tries to compete and stuff have been going through. So, yeah.
Okay, so for those of you who are watching, the main thing we're going to be talking about today are the DPC leagues, the timeline of what Jack has known and what players have known, some of the problems, some of the things that we like, some of the things that we hope change. We're gonna go through all that. But before we get into that, I gotta get him warmed up. I talk really fast, so I gotta get him up to like my energy level. So Jack is going to give us his responses. I'm gonna give him 10 things. He's gonna say care, don't care, or no comment. Don't worry, I'm pretty sure I got a no comment in this list. First up, you ready? Okay.
I'm excited for this segment.
You're excited. Cool, good. Okay, first up, hoodwink spammers.
Care. So I've seen a few like pretty good hoodwinks, but then the usual ones I see, they kind of sit in the back, and if you're winning, they have a good score. It looks good. If you're losing, they still have a good score, and it's not their fault. That's my hoodwink experience so far.
Okay. Mass Twitch DMCAs.
I mean, obviously that it's complicated for case by case, but obviously that's affected a lot of people, and I mean, I don't know, it's such a complicated issue. Like, it is something to care about, but I don't personally have too much involvement in that. So
okay, PBD unretires again.
I mean, that's something we have to care about. He's in our region. He's got a team. He's always a factor. He's always in the mix. So yeah, definitely something that care for sure.
3080s came out, but nobody can get them.
I don't know what that is, so that's no comment.
Okay. Dendi and the new bait stack, which is basically Xperia, all moving to CIS.
I think I would say care. I mean, it's kind of telling, based on their experiences in their own region, and then just based on it's such a kind of unexpected team to like put together and be playing together. But can't blame them, because it's not easy being in the Brazilian scene. So
Cyberpunk launch.
That's for me, that was not really a care, because I didn't play it like some of my friends did, but I don't know. I wasn't gonna play it. So
Mason got banned on Twitch.
No comment. I'm still not really sure why. I
knew I was getting a no comment out of that one.
I don't really watch him. I watch him from time to time. I mean, he can be entertaining at times, but I don't follow that much, so I'm not sure why. But I'm also not super shocked. I mean, sooner or later, I guess. Like, I don't know.
It's temporary. It's not permanent. Dota 2, this team fan shop store thing that's going in.
That's a definite care, especially because we are unsponsored, and that's something where if the information on it could very well affect that, and they're currently, at least for us, from the player and team side, is no information on that. Maybe I would assume that orgs and potential sponsors have probably reached out to Valve or asked about it. Maybe they're having those conversations right now, but from our point of view, that we don't know.
Teammates who buy Midas and Radiance.
That's a throwback. That's other than Wraith King, that's like some like Dota 1 stuff. You see it sometimes, or maybe like Lifestealer or whatever. You care. It's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's a little throwy.
Okay, and then last one, DPC leagues. Convenient last one to pick, right?
Yeah. No comment. No, we're gonna.
No comment. Podcast over.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So big care on that one. Now, I think the really important thing here is to remind people on the timeline. So we're going to rewind a little bit. You see it up on screen right now. We've had it during this whole segment. All the way back to almost a full year ago, February 25th, 2020, introducing regional leagues. Jack, what was the reaction then? What did these regional leagues, what did they have? What were they missing? What was the sentiment when it was announced almost a year ago?
I think from our point of view, it was definitely nice to see that they were gonna exist, that there's gonna be more consistent, structured local play. It was nice that it felt like the DPC it's obviously been continually changed, and like they're trying to take feedback and improve on it, and just make it better. And also like the prize money structure, like I thought that the possible downside of that is that you create situations where like maybe for teams that aren't going to make either be relegated or make the top, you create the possibility of not that meaningful matches between them for the places. But the trade-off for that is exactly what people have been clamoring for, which is you're distributing more money to a tier 2 or tier 3 scene, or teams that or people maybe even playing part-time, or people would consider just putting their hat into the mix and like competing and making the region more competitive. Like that's definitely something that was a plus. And also the other thing with that is the real prize that people are playing for there again is like the big prize, at least, is for DPC points and for going to the majors, and not so much the money itself in the qualifier. So like that was fine. That was probably definitely good that like it was you're not playing for that money there anyway, so reward the people that are like competing and making it like interesting. So I think those were mostly the initial reactions.
We saw a lot more teams signed. We definitely saw more teams get picked up and sponsored.
Yeah, at the time, I think a lot of them were still, I think at the time we were still talking to people who were optimistic about this is depending on, I guess, before or after we were dropped by Chaos. But like even after we were dropped by Chaos, there are still people that were kind of optimistic about the new DPC season. I'm maybe beating you to the punch on this, but in one of the announcements, they kind of insinuated that it would restart in the fall, or it might restart in the fall. So that was something where potential orgs were like, oh, if it's going to start in the fall, and if it's like this, something we might look at.
Yeah, that was April 30th. So about a month later, said that TI was canceled, and then the line itself was, we're working on restructuring the DPC season for the fall, and we'll be providing more information as soon as we have it. That more information came on September 4th, was when they gave us the update on the competitive scene. And one of the things they said was they didn't want to step on third-party toes. And they said, oh, we'll help regions run more tournaments, if they need them, until we get ready to start the actual DPC. Did you feel like there were enough opportunities for teams to play that Valve could stay a little more hands-off? Or did the third-party system not really help out North America enough?
I've worked as a translator, and my translation for the first part of that is we're going to let third-party tournaments handle it. Mm-hmm. So, I do want to credit Valve because they did add to some of the prize pools for the regions. Like I think the ones for us that came to mind were like BTS got some help, and then Realms Collide got some support as well. So that's that obviously helped. But I don't know how to say this, but for one, like it didn't really increase I don't think it really increased the number of tournaments, because ESL didn't run a tournament during that time. So it was kind of the same tournaments, but just bolstered a prize pool, I guess. And so, yeah, that certainly helps. But well, yeah, I guess we'll get to the rest.
Well, one of the things that we saw was NA and SA might have gotten tournaments, but they were generally a much lower prize pool. Like, what was it? We Play, and I can't remember what Epic's was, but like We Play specifically had something, like $200,000 for EU and CIS, and then 30 to 50 for all the other regions.
I think it was even more. The EU CIS one was like,
Oh, maybe it
wasn't
was
it like a
5.
$500,000? Yeah, it was like a
Yeah,
$500,000 or something, or 550.
yeah. That was the one where the teams all banded together, and Tortellini wrote an article about it and said, "Hey, by the way, we lost a ton of money on this." But that leaves NA and SA out again, because you still have the same number of tournaments, but a lot lower prize pool. Do you think Valve should have been kicking even more prize pool in, because you probably had less events and you had less prize pool at the events you did have?
Well, obviously, from the player and team's perspective, you're going to hope for more. But I mean, I would understand, again, if you're talking about regions that have less player base, have less fan interest, it becomes a self-fulfilling kind of cycle, right? It's like, why should we put more into this region that doesn't just put as much or give us back as much? I mean, there's an argument, maybe you want to prop it up, maybe you want to encourage it. And those are all things that, obviously Valve has to evaluate with their own thought process. But it certainly didn't help, because again, just looking at the economics of it, like the top teams are not really getting sponsorship. If you're not winning those tournaments, then you're and you spend like the whole month like scrimming and playing, it might not be, frankly, like worth a lot of people's time to do that. Or if you factor in like COVID and stuff, obviously like it was a bad year for everybody on that front. But let's say you have a family member who was affected, or you had somebody who lost their job or something, and maybe you have to think about what's the trade-off between, can I keep playing, or can I keep competing, can I put my time and effort into this, versus what I have to deal with. For South American teams, some of the players were unable to play from home, or they couldn't go to a team house, and so so the money always helps. No one's ever going to say give us less money.
No, I don't want it.
Yeah. But
you understand why it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward in our timeline, September 4th was, we're really sorry, we're going to communicate more. November 24th is when they finally said the 2021 DPC will start on January 18th. So that was when we got a date, November 24th. Now, Jack, off the top of your head, when did you hear about when your team's going to be playing for the upcoming DPC?
When we're going to be playing, as in...
Yeah. Do you know anything about any of your schedule or division or anything yet?
No. We don't even know who the other teams in our division are. I mean, we can guess, but we don't know.
Yeah. That's the point I was getting at. For the people watching this, there's been a lot of, Jack's been great on Twitter. Like, seriously, go check out his timeline if you want to see some breakdowns. Not him breaking down what's going on. Clarify. But yeah, this is not something where the public doesn't know when these matches are happening. This is internally, teams and managers have no idea. The other regions do have a little more info, but I believe you guys are running off of a tweet from Gods about the general structure, and that's the only info you have, pretty much.
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up. That's all we that's all we know for now. And like, obviously people will hear things, people will try to do some digging and stuff, but for the purposes of any sort of decisions or scheduling and or whatever sponsorship value and stuff this might have, that's all the information that we have.
Yeah. So Valve's next announcement was recently, the 31st, in which they said that they gave us a little more format info. I believe they gave us the TOs that were responsible for everything. They said, how's this going to go into majors and everything? And the best part was they said, well, 4 people will get invited into the upper division based on your form in the last several months. It feels like TI4 all over again, right?
Yeah, again, so I say this as part of a team where we have the we're least affected by that, because right. But again, for all the reasons mentioned before, that means that the last few months of these, not really interregional or some some areas got to play interregional, namely Europe and CIS, and we did with South America, but with huge ping differences and all that. They essentially functioned as they mattered. They mattered quite a bit. Basically, they functioned as qualifiers because they determined the slots and the invites for now, more than anything that happened before. And I understand that that's not crazy or anything, because what are you going to do? Like use old results from like a year ago? But that's something that, it affected different players in different areas differently. If you were not able to play or focus on Dota for whatever reason, and if you were not aware of the stakes of that, then it's quite possible that you got screwed in some way. And frankly, not everybody is on the same playing field already to begin with. That's why there are these international things. That's why the international is the one that everyone looks forward to and sets their sights on. That's why getting to that is so important, because of the obviously existing disparities within the regions. But that's just that's really unfortunate again, we didn't get screwed by that, I don't think, but
you think you don't know.
Yeah, I mean the only argument that we have there is we feel that our region might have lost a slot from that, but I think we only had I'm not sure if that would have been the case anyway, but it kind of feels like we didn't get a chance to. There's no interregional play, so we don't have a chance to prove ourselves against anybody. All we can do is just kind of assume our best on who we think is good and which regions are good, and then you kind of just take the transitive property from there and use that. It's not great.
You had a couple. I saw a back and forth with you and Knoxville on Twitter about how many slots each region deserves, and Jack made this great point about the fact that everyone thought EU was really strong, and then at TI9, most of EU ended up in the bottom. That was right. It wasn't a major. That was TI that you were talking about.
It was that specifically is to address that you hear all the time. Oh well, all the EU teams are better than everybody else, and then TI9 happened. The three best teams obviously did really well, and then you had two teams basically that finished last, and then Alliance finished 13th, 16th, but they obviously weren't they were competitive. I think they had a match that would have put them possibly in upper bracket the very last day. So they were obviously a competitive team. So yeah, they're a strong, deep region. They have had the best teams for the most part, other than I guess China for the past few seasons, and MVP. So obviously they deserve a lot of credit, and they deserve a lot of consideration for how strong and deep their region is. That can't be taken away from them. But we also can't just assume. The whole point of all of this stuff is we can't just assume that they're all their teams are better than everyone else's, and we have direct evidence to the contrary. I mean, TI9 is sure it's a year ago, but I believe the first major of this season where some of the EU teams sat out, and I think Enigma didn't make the major. I believe EG and JStorm finished ahead of all the EU teams. And then if we look at the last major, that was the LA major qualifiers, the third team to qualify from EU had three American players, and two of them are back in the Americas, competing in this circuit now. So look, take nothing away from Europe. They're good. They've produced champions, and Secret might be the most dominant team that we've seen. But we can't assume that all of their teams are better than all of everyone else's. It kind of feels like when it came to some of the slot distribution or stuff, that was kind of the decision that had to be talked about and made, and that's what it ended up being. It was look, EU gets an extra slot, and because CIS did well with them in cross-regional play, they deserve an extra slot. Although by DPC that wouldn't have been the case.
So you don't want to take anything away from EU. Acknowledge that they have a really strong region, and they probably have really strong scrims and training and depth and everything. Valve loves data. They're all about data, and they're all about kind of people handing ideas to them, and then they sort of take the ones they want. What would you say to expanding the number of slots? We've talked about this over and over. We've seen the benefit TI has had from adding extra teams and then getting rid of them in the group stages before the main tournament starts. Would you want to see a 24 or maybe a 20 team major? Do you think that that's the right approach, or do you think there just needs to be better distribution to start with and you keep it at 16?
I mean, the more teams you add, the more volatile or unwieldy it gets. But like, I've been griping about sort of major formats for years, and my biggest gripe is that you just want to play as many teams as possible. Like, you're talking about data, you want as much data as possible. If you're going to have DPC points, be this like impartial indicator of region strength and slots and things that are super important to the lifeblood of every region, then you want as much data as possible. TI has the best format because you play everybody. And so, or you play everybody at least in a big group, right? So you have a huge sample size of data of relative strength, and then you use that to start to separate teams. I mean, that's as fair as it can possibly be. You're not there playing for months, but you're playing everybody. That's always been my kind of issue with the formats. Is just, we let's put it this way. We didn't do well at Leipzig, but we had 4th seed Secret in our group, and they won the whole tournament. And then we in LA, we were going to have 4th seed OG in our group because they'd sat out. And like, come on, like, these teams are probably not the bottom 4 teams in the tournament, but they start in your group, and that determines so much of like where you go and how your tournament progresses. We would just hope that you play more teams and you have more information. There's who loses there.
So more matches really is more inter-regional matches. That brings me to another conversation I had with a Dota talent a while ago about TI and about what TI does to the scene. Because look at what happened to us without one this year. Things sort of collapsed. Would you prefer to see the major system without a TI? So you increase the prize pool of each major, and you have these leagues, and you have a lot of games, but you also have set off seasons and a little more regularly scheduled play, rather than about 5 months of the calendar consumed by TI.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, that's kind of what this what these revamps to the system seem focused on, right? It's to provide more consistent play. And if the incentives for those consistent play match up to it, then I think you just have a more vibrant scene, because it's not like this 2 weeks out of the year like makes or breaks your year. It makes some people millionaires and sets them up for life, and then it everybody else who like doesn't like the fact that I'm just, before I jump around too much, so last year I think a team that finished in like the top 8 of TI, like, you would have had to win like multiple majors or something to like beat their distribution of the prize pool, right? So like, that to me is just, it's so imbalanced. It's like, it takes so much to win a major. You have to be like, it's the
winning
same.
A TI. It's the same as winning a TI. It's just a 30th of the prize pool. Yeah.
And so like, that rewards, again, it creates more storylines, because teams are peaking at the right time. They stand to gain a lot more from doing well, and the rest of the year just becomes amplified in importance. And TI would still be, the granddaddy of them all, right? It's still, you could have TI's prize pool, and it would still be bigger than like anything else by far. It's still like the pinnacle tournament, in like esports and team esports for sure. But it just, everything else gets amplified, and it's not. I mean, I can see arguments both ways. You're building this TI. There's so much pressure resting on these matches or whatever. Sure, I understand that. But I think for the overall health of the scene, for there to be a more vibrant circuit, you want other things to matter a lot, like throughout the season.
Well, and if other things matter, that's more eyeballs, and that's probably more sponsors. And that's where I think that you are in this perfect position to talk about sponsoring a Dota team. And something that, I think Reddit actually has a pretty good grasp on, because I've seen a lot of discussions around it, is that every other region is pretty heavily funded by betting sponsors. But North America and the laws for North American countries make betting much more challenging, which is probably a huge reason why NA teams don't actually have as many sponsors. That's my guess. That's my perspective. For those who know my background, could understand why I might be biased that way. But you have a team that you want to get sponsored, either by a company who pays for a boot camp, through a tournament, or an actual org signing you. What does it mean that you don't even know as of, what's today? As of the 3rd, today is the 3rd, where your team is playing? When and where and how often your team is playing? What does that mean for you trying to get your players paid?
I've had a chance to say this directly to people at Valve at TIs and these exact words, I guess, for years since like VGJ Storm when we had conversations with sponsors, and the feedback I would get from the good people who were working there and trying to make this work and find sponsors was, sponsors, they have a yearly budget or they have a seasonal budget, and they're going to ask you, when are you playing? Is there, a guarantee that you're going to be competing in these matches? Like, and then, are you even going to have a team in like a few months? Like, before any of those decisions have to be made, like, you have to know, you have to have answers to these questions. If you asked us, when we're playing and when our season is, for the most part, the answer to that has been pretty unknown. Like, we don't know when the matches are. We don't know, we haven't known, like, if we're going to be participating in them for whatever reason. And then the final question about whether you're going to have a team in a few months, it's kind of interrelated. Obviously, you can never guarantee it, but that's also a question that you just don't know. So without these questions, these boxes checked, it's pretty hard to justify sponsoring something. That's just, I would think that's just, we've also been told that we were told at one of the TIs that, directly, why haven't you approached like this or that, big non-endemic sponsor? I think you guys are just, bad at finding sponsors. Now, there might be some truth to that, but I don't see somebody who can't answer these questions being able to elicit, sponsor confidence and faith and growth and interest. You have to be able to answer these questions.
So, and that's why betting sponsors are an easier one, because they mostly care about games to exist, because that's their content. That's their business. Games are going to exist. If you are playing, people see their brand, games are going on in every region, kind of thing, and that helps them out. What other sponsors are there? What are the categories of the big non-endemics they tell you to go after? Or what do you see, or even who do you try and talk to? We don't need specific brands, but like those categories. Hardware sponsors give you mice. They don't really give you a lot of money a lot of times. So, who else is out there?
Well, again, I think the better people to be asking that question would be the ones who've been successful in building their kind of brands and organizations getting that. But I mean, anybody that wants to reach a young, gaming audience, and for Dota, actually, I guess increasingly in some ways older and more disposable income audience, maybe than some other games, because so many of us have been, playing or in this we grew up with this game, right? And people are starting to obviously transition into families and careers and things like that. Anybody who wants to reach them with consistency. And so for the most part, that's been, there's reliability. Like, if your team is always going to be at TI, and if your team is always going to be at the majors, obviously there's more exposure there. But for everyone else, so again, this is something that I just thought about while you were talking about this, but I do want to give credit for also one other change that Valve made, which is kind of with the qualifiers and kind of forcing like the top teams to qualify through their region. So that was something that I think is helpful to sponsors and to the teams, because instead of this team just doesn't play for like months until they get to the major, or maybe even they sit out half the year, which we saw this year with the DPC, and they can still get to the majors or TI. You now have guaranteed competition against them if you're in their region. You have guaranteed competition through qualifiers. You have a way to gauge yourself, to improve, to have them be a part of your environment.
Team Secret draws eyeballs. So even if it's not about Secret having sponsors, it's about your sponsor knowing you're going to play Secret.
Yeah, you're gonna watch your team play Secret, guaranteed. And obviously, as much of that happens is good for other teams in the region. And the kind of rift where that sort of thing happens is, with like, it's related to everything else with like TI and stuff. There becomes potentially disincentive for either their players or their team to want to do that, because if everything is centralized at TI and that's all that you have to get to like get the pie, you don't want to participate in other things. You don't want to be flying around the whole season. You don't want to be constantly proving yourself and qualifying and playing majors. You'd rather just have it be like, this 3 months out of the year, I got to be active and my year is made. So there's always these little, not little, but there's always these conflicts of sort of interest that need to be balanced and accounted for.
So going back to the DPC and the sort of quagmire it is currently in, South America is running one open qualifier for 4 slots and it's best of 1 elimination, right? That's the format? Is that what's happening?
I believe so, yeah.
And then it's all lower division teams. So you can't even get into upper division that way. This reminds me of the year where every single minor and major had different formats, and Valve was like, do whatever you want, and then you had these really weird formats. Do you think, and they learned from that. They came forward and said, this is the format that our tournaments will have. These TOs, you have to do this. Where did that go? Why did we lose that?
So, I mean, this is one of those things where it's hard to definitively say without knowing the discussions that happen behind the scenes, because, presumably this is something that they talked about and discussed, and, they can't run it through public reaction before they do that. And then you don't know in this case, if the organizer had, how much agency they had in that decision. It's possible they had none, and they're just getting the flack for it. It's possible that they were empowered to make the decision entirely, and now they have to, face the music of whatever that is. So yeah, it's if you put the DPC label on stuff, I think sooner or later there's going to have to be norms for rules, for structure, for things, because you're using an objective metric to measure performance, and so you need to have consistent rules that are based around that. In this situation, should they look at the individual needs and circumstances of each region? Sure. But I think, for South America, like, some of the ones that were baked into how this COVID era online stuff transpired is that people were trying to play tournaments in a different region, sometimes with 150 plus ping if you're from Brazil and not Peru, during a pandemic in which they didn't have a team house and might not even have access to stable internet. And that is then used to determine who's in form and, who's ready, who should be invited. Like, that's, I don't know, that seems like a pretty big oversight.
And on top of that, I believe Dota Pit published format and dates and everything yesterday. So in an era in which there's quarantine rules about traveling and it is harder to get around and every country has different restrictions about how much time do players have to get to a boot camp or to get to a team house or to scrim or to train, I think people need to keep that in mind when you look at the form of each region. But let's if you were to make a wish list, all right, let's be honest. The first time Valve tries anything, it's usually a mess. TI1 had best of ones like all the way up until I think the second to last final bracket. All right, so let's not rose-colored glasses that one. So what's the wish list? Okay, what do we want players to be talking about? Reddit to push for, conversations to happen. What do players need for this second time around?
That question is hard to answer because I think just different regions just have very different circumstances. Like our problems here in North America are not going to be the same. And again, we have probably the smallest player base. We have the highest costs of anything, cost of living, cost of sponsorship, whatever. Like we don't have we've had 3, I think, total DPC events. So 95% of the stuff that's happening is in Europe or Asia. So it's hard. We have unique problems. And one of the things that was discussed when the kind of DPC prize distribution came about was, are you going to have the same amount of money for each region? Because that amount of money might mean a lot more to somebody in a different region, and it might not be enough inducement for somebody to compete in another region, or like it obviously like affects things very different. And that's hard. It becomes like a global market, like labor issue.
You have to scale to like average income per region, and you got to hire Nahaz full time to do an economic breakdown for every single thing. Yeah,
it's difficult, but I think that the wish list for this period of time was definitely that Valve would have more direct kind of support, and obviously everybody talks about communication, but kind of just direct support for regions that obviously were going to have a tougher time through this, or obviously already had trouble sustaining. And then the next part of that is just, can we make the rest of the year more meaningful? I don't imagine anybody, like I don't think fans or Valve or anybody was probably overjoyed that the most successful, accomplished players, and the most dynastic teams in the history of the game were just not playing for half the season. I can't imagine that they were just, happy about that. I can't imagine that was good for the overall health of the scene. I always speak, with rose-tinted glasses about that first DPC season. You mentioned that it was a mess. It was all over the place. But obviously, part of my bias there is that our team did well during that season, better than we had. But a big part of that also was that, there was a lot of opportunity. It wasn't great for organizers. There had its problems, but there was a lot of opportunity. There were so many teams from our region that got to compete at LANs. I think 6 to 7 different teams. There were sponsors who were willing to come in and get a slice of the pie. You had people come up and prove themselves through tier 2 or these smaller LANs that ended up then being on top teams. That was a year, I believe, that Nisha made a name for himself on Kingwood.
Yeah.
Everybody had opportunities, and it was not possible for the dynastic tier top teams to kind of just take every slice of pie, because you just can't. You can't travel to everything. You can't play everything. And maybe you can argue that that's not what's best for the scene, but for the other parties in the scene that aren't those stone cold top teams, it is what's best, because you have a sense of growth, of competition, of opportunity. And what more can you ask for if you're trying to be a professional?
So you need a hybrid. It can't be this sterile, so few tournaments that are all exactly the same, but it also can't be mass chaos, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, again, not to keep going back to that season, but I think one of the lines that needed to be drawn from that season is, you had organizers just kind of ignoring each other's, dates. You had situations where people were playing 3 or 4 best of 3s in one day. Often you would play a team.
Same teams.
Yeah, you play the same team twice in the same day for different events. Obviously, that needed to be fixed. But the kind of direction we've gone down instead is just contraction and concentration. It's more at TI, more less at majors even.
Because we went from the 3 million to the 1 million majors.
Yeah, and there's been some kind of reversal of that, in that the tier 2, whatever teams you want to call them, tier 1.5 teams in any region can now get more slice of the pie. But again, the concentration remains at TI, and I don't know if that's best for many of the actors in the scene.
Here's a proposed structure for you, and I want to know honestly, is this good or bad in your head? We keep the single major system, but instead of a single minor preceding a major, the way that it used to be, you have a series of minors, maybe separated out by region. So NA and SA have 2 minors, and Europe and CIS have 2, and China and Southeast Asia have 2. And in the DPC League, first place goes to the major. Second place goes to minor number 1. Third place goes to minor number 2. And then those semi-regionalized minors then send people all into the major. So you end up with a schedule of minor, minor, major, minor, minor, major. So you increase the number of tournaments, slightly decrease the international competition, but you have more LANs for LAN experience. And then you get LAN regional strength rather than guesses at how many slots people should have.
That sounds interesting to me. Like everybody's always in favor of more LANs. Everybody's always in favor of more, I guess, cross-regional competition, but also just more reps, more kind of games to be played, more meaningful matches, better data to make decisions about who deserves to be where, and just more consistent participation and interest. Like those things can't possibly hurt. So, I like it. I like the sounds of it.
Okay, so we're gonna move on from all the format and all the talking and everything like that. I want to talk about your team for a little bit before we wrap up. Getting sponsored is hard. There is no schedule right now, but there is going to be this fan shop where people can directly support teams in theory. We don't know what the split is. We don't know what the method is. We don't know if it's penance or sets or anything like that. What this says to me is that players are going to have to brand themselves more, right? Like think of how quickly a Dendi skin or an Arteezy signature or something like that will sell, which means you're going to see the top teams getting more money from this and the lower teams not nearly as much because they don't have the personalities. When you look at your team, do you think we need to invest in their persona aspect? Or do you say, no, that doesn't matter. We're still focusing on scrims. We're still doing this. That part's not important.
That's a good question. I've always encouraged my guys to do interviews and do content and obviously build your brand. And I think Lilith is a perfect example of a player who's done that very well. For himself, he pays a lot of attention to it. The way he manages his brand and his presence. He's a player. I don't think he's played at a TI before, but he has like a pretty big presence. And so if you're good at it and you pay attention to it and you put effort and time into it, it's something that it's an investment in yourself. Obviously, right? Obviously, some people just have more magnetic personalities and brand. Now, there's obviously being successful helps quite a bit. So the competition aspect of you want to win, and that's what's going to bring you the most. And some people are better or worse at it than others. So it's something that from the team side, I've always encouraged my players to do that. I always want them to do it. It's a struggle sometimes because they have a lot to juggle and it's not easy. And sometimes it's a chicken or egg thing because sometimes the content or the request or whatever is something that isn't particularly they don't think it's particularly interesting or engaging. It's just like a drop in the bucket. If we're playing some match on some group stage match against a team that probably isn't going to do that well in the tournament, and there's like 1,000 people watching, am I going to get a player excited for the post game interview? Are they going to have lots to say? Probably not. That's just how it is. But there's always both. You obviously always want to keep building up, but you can't rely on that either. At some point, the success and the winning is what drives the most returns, the most amount of people to care about, like you in any way, and then to sell yourself best. That's like the best way to do it. So, there's nothing wrong with it. I think that's fine, and that's just how it is. It's not like we shouldn't expect to be more popular, more successful than anybody just because whatever. We just got to keep our heads down, and we have to do well, and that's we have to win. That's that simple.
All right, if you were to sell your players right now for people watching, let's go build their brand. Build their brands for them so that they get to scrim. Give me like a one-liner on each player, right? So, MSS for me is just like as sarcastic funny as it gets. Like he doesn't even have to roll his eyes. You could just feel it hitting you with everything that he says. And like, to me, that's who he is. And that's what makes him like, I love him in content. It's great because he's just, you're like, I don't, is he mad at me? I can't tell. I don't know. Is he joking? Is it funny? I don't know. So that's my sell on MSS. Like, give me their one-liner on each of your players.
Oh man, this is okay. Avery is he's like the.
Sorry, he wins the sarcasm one. Sorry, I forgot.
SVG is the wise old man with the wit and the heart of gold, I guess. Quinn is like the man. I feel this you put me on the spot here because I have to say something, but it can't be too. Quinn is a rager on the outside, but
the most creative in his descriptions of people.
Yes. Quinn doesn't curse. So he has to get very creative. And let me just tell you that some of the stuff I've heard from everybody gets frustrated in Dota. It's some of the funniest stuff ever. Again, I wish like surely that there's more that can be displayed from these guys. Yawer is hilarious. He doesn't put himself out there much, but he's like the class clown of the team for sure. If you ask anybody. Lelis, we haven't had the fortune of living in a team house with just yet. I'm sure he'll bring his own things to the table, but yeah. It's hard for me to just think of a tagline for everybody, but I wish that some of that stuff was on display some more. It's some real good people on our team, and they're hilarious as well.
I think that in general, the Dota community wishes they could see that too. I think players are this mystical, barely accessed, and that's why the summit is so well done, because you get to actually see the players being themselves. Okay, I feel like this is a good place to leave it. I feel like we hit the timeline. Is there any burning topic on these DPC leagues that you are desperate for people to know, to talk about, to comment, to have a perspective on? Is there anything that's still in your mind?
Not really. I'm kind of really curious, how the majors are going to work. Like what happens if I don't know. There's too many questions, too many things to think about. I just hope that everyone got through this tough year okay, and I hope this year is better for our scene and everybody in general. Obviously, we just had a rough one, so I hope we have a good 2021.
Well, that's a nice sentiment to end on. I hope everyone has a good 2021. We made it. Go follow SVG, CCNC, UR, Lelis, MSS, Jack as well. Support the team, boost them. The better numbers they have, the more sponsors want to sign them. Send them funny things on Twitter so that they can laugh and harass Jack with them. Go do all of that, and please leave any comments you have about things you want to see in the DPC, because over and over again, Valve has proven that they do listen. They just sometimes need to be hit with something a few times. So hit us with that in the comments. Thank you for hanging out, and thank you, Jack, for your time. I think this was a really valuable perspective.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for, what you do and thinking about the stuff, obviously, in detail and bringing to light. And I hope the next one of these doesn't have to wait for so long.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Take care.